Yeah. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you all on my session. I'm going to share my screen just in a second. It's cool for the recording. Was cool to see some of the friendly faces and friends. This is going to be more of a technical session, but I hope everyone can take some.
Still a long time ago when I faced with him. I didn't step up maybe Casey knows because he kind of finished.
Could you mute Wolfpack? Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna jump right in because I have slides. But what to expect from this session is a lot of demos and live coding, which is probably creeps me out, but that's the way I roll. So let's go. All right, so I'm gonna start with a quick intro into the topic. I'm talking today about modern web development with headless Drupal. If that interested you in any way, if you're liking front-end development or just came for the cool demos, either way, I hope you learned something cool today. The reason I'm picking this topic is I've been both in the Drupal land and in the non-Drupal land for a while to kind of see everything that the cool kids like, and would like to showcase and demo some of it to you. A little bit about myself. My name is Alexei Gorobet. I'm Director of Engineering at Jacala. Jacala is a digital agency, the MarTech, that used to be in North America. We were acquired. We used to be FFW. Before that, we used to be Pro People. Some of the Stanford folks would definitely remember us by those old names. Same people, same me. Hi. And a little bit about myself and my ties to Stanford. Funny enough, this is my desk at Knight Center, and we're launching Stanford GSB. I don't know if we're actually launching, but it's good for the story. So I worked with the GSB folks in 2012, I think, 2013, somewhere. But yeah, we have an interesting history. A few of them joined this call. Thank you, guys. This is on the Knight Center. There's a display panel where a bunch of cards flip around usually. And this is the Moldovan flag. This is where I'm from. So I'm originally from Moldova. Right now live in Orlando, Florida. And this in the corner is actually my favorite food of all time. It's the chicken parm sandwich and Jimmy V's Cafe. And every time I go to Bay Area, I come to Jimmy V's Cafe to try it. That one, I think I took a picture 2014, I think was the last time I was there. Unfortunately, but yeah, it's a drive. If I go to San Francisco, I don't usually make it to Stanford, unfortunately. But maybe next time. So that's me, but let's jump into the topic for today. And I would like to talk, Jimmy V's is near the Knight Management Center where Stanford GSB is. So I'd like to talk about a bit of a history on why I picked this topic. And specifically, I'll key the words modern web development. And of course, modern means different things to different people, but I'd like to kind of lay the land and landscape. So what is modern at this point? So React.js came out in 2013, or was open source in 2014. Drupal 8 came out in 2015. That was 10 years ago. We got the modern React frameworks, Next.js and Gatsby, released in 2015, 2016. In 2020, the world has changed a little bit. Mac Alliance was formed, which is kind of the Gartner of composable CMSs, I like to call it, and started categorizing different CMSs and different tools based on how they compose with each other. So you might have heard the word composable, and how like certain features, certain capabilities are packaged and composed from the best of breed systems. 2021, I think, is the time where the first Copilot, GitHub Copilot, assistant was released. Everyone was blown away by what AI can do in your editor. Also, ChatGPT was kind of big.
Meant to be.
And I think where we are today is even more interesting. So we have the release of Drupal CMS, which is a very interesting direction, and it caters more to the no-code audience and people composing solutions from basically modules and layout builder, experience builder. You probably don't need to code. But on the other end of the spectrum is all the coding became just so much more convenient. So we got editors with AI included. We got every single AI tool like ChatGPT or Cursor or Claude knowing how to write React. We got the most probably compatible UI library for the web with the AI tools. It's called ShadCN UI, and that's coming from a Drupal person, which is really interesting and intriguing. And we kind of see this explosion of what I call the era of personal software, where the vibe coders are creating their own software. People go in and just create code and front end faster than anything else. But what they don't do usually is they don't know anything about the backend. And that front end, although very easy to create, sometimes needs to be integrated with like a CMS, a backend system, anything like that. And a lot of time from when some of the Contentful content stack vendors came in and took over the headless world, the API first world, a lot of time has passed, but I think there's still some things that Drupal does better. And I would like to explore them today and kind of show you the workflow from both sides, the front-end person and the back-end person in Drupal interacting with the system end-to-end. And I'd like to start with a demo. And it's very interesting what you're going to see today, because you're going to see a demo first of Contentful. I want to set a North Star of what experience I'm trying to recreate, if I have to recreate it. Some of you might not need that, and some of you would be perfectly fine with also using Drupal CMS, which is an extremely capable system. But I think this more caters to also the developers in the room who would like to learn what's on the other side of the pond. So a headless CMS is like a SaaS offering usually that gives you the CMS in the box, right? You pay for it, it's hosted, it never goes down, you have high availability and things like that. But what is at center, front and center, is content. And what you need to do with this content, you need to edit it, you need to preview it, you need to publish it, and you need to see it on the front end. So those are the things I want to walk you through, kind of for you to understand how this is done outside of Drupal, so that we have a North Star to look for. So this is a page in Contentful. There's a button called Live Preview, which opens for me a decoupled headless front end effectively of my Next.js application in a side-by-side editor where I can view the application as well as I can make some edits. So a lot of times this would be, in Drupal Preview API, that would be your theme rendering. In this case, it's a completely separate application. So what I have here is this application is available on the domain just if I open it. Like I think if I click here, open a new tab, I'll be able to see it just in a published state. Okay, there it is. But I also see it in my CMS. And why is that valuable? So the valuable thing about this, I think, is the editorial experience that you can enable with this. So here I have a headline, and let's say instead of Alchemist Vault, I want to call it Stanford Webcam Vault. And I can make some certain edits to my content, and I get like instant feedback on my preview environment. So in fact, this is done mostly because the front-end technologies we use today support things like state management on the client side, but also support things like hot reloading, and basically the server that runs this could be looking and scanning those changes. So that's cool and interesting. Let's make another change here. I don't know, I'll clone this paragraph. It's instant, although my spacing is not supported. That's fine. Let me go back from the other side of the thing. So let's say I want to edit this experience from the front end, and I don't know what component is that. So I click this spellbound stationery, for example, and Contentful as a system is hooked with some of the metadata information that tells me, well, this component is actually this component here. So I can go straight to editing this component, and I'll make a simpler change here. So everything is instant, but probably not really saved. So to be saved, there's actually an auto-save API that happens, and I could force it to save, but I don't have to. But I think the point I'm trying to draw your attention to here is to be a successful CMS that is an API layer for your front end, you kind of need to bring those things to the table so that you get like instant feedback from the offers, editing those pages. And a lot of that would be something that sometimes I would hear in the community would be like, well, I'm missing features if I go headless. Or like, this doesn't work the way I would like it to do. So today, my exploration is centered around that. I would like to recreate this experience in Drupal and show you all the kinks. There's some principles that I think make a good developer experience. And I'm talking about developer experience in the modern way for getting this kind of instant feedback loop. So instant feedback loop is important. So React, Next.js, all the frameworks that are currently running on the client, all the JavaScript frameworks to be categorizing them, provide you with that instant feedback loop. As you edit code, it gets there, shipped to your browser instantly, no refresh. So that's cool. And the same I expect from my CMS. I want any edit I make to be available on the front end. So that's one of the principles. Now, the other is I would like my model that I develop with to be a good composable model. I want components that I use in my system to be composable with each other. I want to promote locality of behavior, means components know about themselves and I can glance at the code to understand what they do. So 20 different pre-processed functions are modifying my code before it goes to my theme to render. And at the last stage, there is the theme that makes all the other decisions. So there's no locality in that. I also want this to be vibe code ready. So the term vibe code, for those not familiar, Andre Kapati from the AI world, from OpenAI, coined it as basically using your editor, telling it what to do, and basically accepting all the changes that it does and giving it to the vibes, not validating and checking your code. And the industry kind of has shifted. A lot of developers or a lot of folks who are not developers are now vibe coding and creating those applications. And I want my developer experience to be accepting the fact that this is a thing. And for that, usually it means I would like to verify what the vibe coder did and make a squiggly line, for example, and say where AI did something wrong. And AI Ready kind of talks to the same point. So I want to explore these things today. For that, I want to give you like the full recipe up front before we go into the demos. So a headless CMS recipe of how to develop one, deploy one, consists of a front-end experience that implements 4 different things. Routing is what URLs are available and what do they do. Data fetching is the data that's not available in the front-end system, needs to be checked, fetched from somewhere, for example, Drupal. Rendering is how do I render this page? Is it instant? Is it delayed? Is it statically rendered? Is it dynamically rendered? And previewing is that feedback loop that I mentioned. Getting ability to view content that is not yet published, getting ability to view content that is not yet ready to be saved, all of these kind of stuff. So we're going to try to...
Alexei, you have a question in the chat that probably fits in here. Dimitri asks, do you need to create your front-end app first in order to even preview anything?
Of course. So do we want to create that front-end app now? Yes, you need to create a front-end app first. So a little story. So what you saw here with the Contentful, and by the way, I'm not looking at the chat, so if you guys have questions, feel free to surface them. But I also have a tight deadline, so I'm going to be skipping through and doing a lot of demos, and easier to ask in the demo than probably in one of those steps. So what I did for this session, and this is not the first time I give this sessions, so I had prep. That's cool. But I have an app in Contentful that I was showing to you that was already created. So this is an app that kind of connects to Contentful, retrieves content from Contentful, and it's a Next.js app. So I have a mono repo, which is a way to manage multiple repositories under the same roof. And I challenged myself to, okay, what does it take for me to, this is the Contentful app in the marketing folder, and this is the Drupal marketing folder, basically another Next.js application that recreates the same thing, but with Drupal. So this is my starting point where I wanted to walk you through kind of all of these concepts. So the app, you can create a Next.js app from scratch using create next app. You could use one of the starter kits. You could use my starter kit. The app, basically, when you create the app, you can start it with npm run dev or something like that. So I'm just going to start it here for clarity what I'm doing. And I have this Drupal marketing app that is meant to create this experience. So I'm going to quickly talk about the things that I mentioned on the AI side and how I can edit content, edit front-end easily without being attached to the particular platform with this approach. Before I joined this call, I basically created a Stanford webcam page on my site. And you can totally do that by placing a file called page.tsx in a folder that would be your route, and that would create a route. This is in Next.js, this is called file-based routing. So the file structure followed is basically replicating what you're going to see on the site. And I'm going to show you how I did this. I used this cursor editor, which is an IDE editor, basically. And I told it this prompt. This is not prouder. Okay, there's probably more things that I told it. Create a new page, and I told it the folder where to do that. I told it kind of the topic and what components it should have. It tried to analyze a few of my folders, and it created this page and this artifact for me, this file, 66 lines. I later realized that it put it in the wrong folder, so I told it even to move it, like, hey, you're not doing this right, and it moved it. And this is kind of illustrates like how autonomous you can be with this front-end code. You could be really vibe coding a lot of it. So this was created fully with AI, right? So let's take a look. I have this localhost app slash Stanford webcam, and I have this page. It will take some time for the first time to load. Okay, so nothing impressive other than the page was created with AI, but that's how I can iterate on my front end. What's cool is that because this was code and not a configuration, it was actually able to look in my other folders and understand what am I using. So it found my hero component and actually used my hero component from my code base. It also found my duplex component and used that component from the code base. And because it also has TypeScript, which is kind of the universal language right now to write JavaScript, you write it with types. It also was able to understand what does it need to do to mimic. So all of that was created in one shot, basically by using my editor as a tool. So that gets you nowhere, right? You probably want to tweak it and do things with this. But this is to illustrate the first concept I wanted to talk about, which is the concept of routing. So I created a page, put it in the folder, and it just kind of works. It appears on my site. Let's take a quick look of what this experience enables for me in terms of that immediate feedback loop. So as I type here Stanford Webcamp 123, and I just basically switch the tab, it is that instant loop that I talked about. So this is what React apps can do for you. You comment something out, it disappears. You uncomment it, it appears. This is the experience I want as a developer, like ideally. So enough about that. The complicated part about routing is nothing is static, right? You're probably not impressed by this. So let's take a look at what challenges we have to solve when we're routing with like an actual CMS. So the Next.js has a concept for routing, although it's file-based. There are some patterns that are called catch-all routes. And basically, they're patterns that allow you to put anything in between, let's say, slash and then the end of it. And this is what we need to rely on. We need to tell Drupal, go to Drupal and ask Drupal, hey, do you have a page for this route? So article/123. Do you have a page for this? And this is how this could look like. So you have this params variable that comes from Next.js that says, well, everything that I had in my files, called slug, for example, here, I will put in this params, and now you can use it to call another separate system. And what I do here is I call Drupal and basically ask Drupal, hey, do you have a page for that? If you do, cool, let's render it. If you don't, it's a 404 or a page not found. So that's routing kind of in a nutshell. But that's not very exciting, right? What does this get page actually do? So this part that says get route, what does it do? How do I fetch from Drupal? And this is where I want to kind of walk you through some of the internals of this for you to get a better understanding. So in Drupal, you can have data fetching using a couple of methods. Some of them are native, some of them are in contrib. My favorite one, and I recommend, is using GraphQL module. And although it's not in core, there's another module called GraphQL Compose, which makes a lot of things much easier for you to do. And it exposes some things on the GraphQL layer that are basically optimized for this workflow. So what I'm doing here, and a little bit about GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language designed by Facebook, designed to be fetching just the data you need, manipulating the data on the server, and basically giving the shape, defining the shape of the data from your frontend. So if I would want to fetch a page, I could fetch exactly the page. If I would want to fetch a page with its components, I could do this as well with one shot. That's my goal. So there is a special query here, and GraphQL has this concept of queries, that I could give it the Drupal path, and I could tell it, hey, what do I have on this route that's slash? And what it will return to me is it will return to me something that is a little bit of an unknown, because this path could be a redirect, this path could be a page, and this path could be not found. So it did return me something called route internal. So that's helpful. That means a page does exist. So in GraphQL, I can drill down into some of my types and say, when type of this query is route internal, I'm going to quickly make this bigger. Then I would like to get the title of this entity. Okay, I'm going to go into the entity. I'm going to get, well, depending on what entity that is, let's say that's a node page. I'm going to say I need the title, I need the body, body is not available here. That's fine. Let's do path. And I click it and it says, yes, indeed, for your query of path / I found an entity called homepage that has the path / home. That's cool, but to render my page, usually I need more than that. So I have a field called components, and in that field called components, I have multiple components. One of them is called paragraph hero, for example. And if the component is paragraph hero, I would like to return for it title, no title, headline, heading, and description. Description? Yes. Go away, docs. Go away, this thing. How do I make this smaller? Anyway, I'll just do this. Sorry, guys. So now I have not just the home page, but I also have the hero component. And if I would have 2 hero components, I would have both of them. So this is the kind of experience that I want for my front-end developer to have. And you saw all of these autocomplete magic happen. And you never go to an API and read about an API documentation, because GraphQL has something that's called introspection. It is a typed language and it is introspectable. That means GraphQL itself will give me all the information about all of my queries and the possible values returned from those queries and how else I can query them. And even more so, like if I don't include components in this query, if I don't include the field, the backend would not call the entity load or things that are needed to load those fields. So what I need is what I fetch. That's the power and the interesting part. So let's look at how my actual routing is organized in my code. So I have this get route. So you saw this route query, which has a path. I probably want to fetch a length code as well. And I only have one node type, for example, here. And my node type is defined in this component, basically. It only renders heading and basically renders the rest of the components using something we call the component renderer. But you will see me jumping around in my editor, and that's very interesting. You'll ask me, well, Alexi, what are you doing? What is this? Is there some magic? And this is the power of the experience that you're getting with GraphQL and the tooling that exists around it. With a GraphQL plugin in your editor, you can actually jump into any one of those fields and any one of those code fragments and see where they're defined and what happens with them. So route internal, for example, has a URL, internal, breadcrumbs, and entity. And route entity has all sorts of entity types that exist. And this is my tooling telling me what I can do here. And it has autocomplete here as well. So for example, I have an article. So I can do node article. And if my field is an article, look at this Copilot guy giving me all the interesting information. That's good. That's wrong though. Article is already an entity, so you're wrong. So I'll do title, I'll do body with summary, and that's very cool. So it makes me very productive here. But something happened here, like Copilot tried to make some suggestions, and of course they were not right. So Copilot does something like that sometimes. So look at this, me hovering at this field and getting this field does not exist on node article. So this is TypeScript, inferring the types from my GraphQL schema and telling me this type does not exist. Or even I think it's the GraphQL plugin itself. In this node article, if we open it, there is no such field as description. And this is why it tells me, oh, what is this? Yeah, it tells me it's not a thing. So I am immediately aware of all my surroundings and basically can tell all of my AI editors to not lie to me. It's what I called hallucination proof. So that's how I fetch data, right? So then I fetch data in the node, and then what are my components data fetching looking like? Well, the moment I fetch the component, like a hero banner, for example, I would not like to define it in the node component. I would like to reuse it across my components, maybe article and page. So GraphQL supports something called fragments, which let me define a fragment once, which is kind of that depicting that shape, and then reuse it across all of my ecosystem by basically expanding it. So you basically need to expand a component like that. That's how we include that component's data into it. So the process here is what I call a hoisted data fetching. All of the components are telling the shape of their data they're expecting to see, and then telling the top level hoisting data fetching mechanism, please get me all of the page data all at once. So that's what's happening with my page. If we look here, well, not here, but here, and I refresh this page, this is my home page. This page is fully coming from Drupal using the one-shot data fetching, if that makes sense. So let's take a look at the data fetching things we explored here. I think we covered this. So one-shot data fetching, individual pages, the components data fetching are co-located with each other. And these are the things that we need to do. But one thing I didn't notice and didn't mention, and I'll just briefly give you the name for the tool so that you're not looking for it. It's this thing called GQL.tada. So TypeScript inference, which is the TypeScript method of understanding the environment it's in and reading through the code and telling you what type the value would be, is basically working in your IDE as a service. And to help that service, you could provide sometimes some plugins. So GQL.tada is a tool, a plugin that lets you infer the types based on the data that you fetched. If you didn't fetch that data, it will tell you that you don't have this data. It's not available. You're not supposed to use it. So that's a very interesting tool. And you can see it in action here by having this fragment, and basically the data as I hover over it, rather I hover over it here, having the name of the field and the type. So it says title is a string. But if I remove title from my data fetching, this will be squiggly lined and it will say, you don't have title, mister. And I would have to go and understand like TypeScript telling me what it's trying to tell me. But at least I know that I'm using something that doesn't exist. And it's real time. This is my developer experience. And of course, if I want to use something that does exist, I add something like body. No, of course, node page does not have body. So I hallucinated. I add path, for example, and it says path is not being used. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's just print the path on the page. And I go to this page. Where's my page? And the path is here. Like, it knows it exists. So I'll remove that, and you kind of need to be aware of this as an enabler of this workflow. GQL.tada is what makes this possible. I understand I don't have as much time, so let's go into the next phase. It's called rendering, and I want to talk here about some of what enables this workflow and what are some of the misconceptions that exist maybe in the space that I'd like to debunk. So React in 2014 was released as a client-side library. Later, when Next.js came out, it was the time where we started rendering React on the server. So we called it SSR. Now, when Gatsby became popular, we were pre-rendering React on the server and started calling it static site generation. Then around 2019, I believe, or 2020, is when Next.js came with this idea of incremental static regeneration. It's more of a static generation, but done when you need it. So it can generate it when you access the page. It can also regenerate it if it gets stale. And finally, the last pattern, which I won't go into, is partial pre-rendering, where you could be pre-rendering some part of the page and shipping them from the CDN, and then dynamically rendering things from the server using a stream later. So those are all mechanisms to treat React servers. So there's kind of a client-side rendering, maybe appetite for most of the React developers, but there's certainly more to that. And I want to kind of explore and explain this pattern because it applies to those full stack applications that we're trying to build here. So we're used to server rendering things in Drupal, and I wouldn't want to lose that capability to render things on the server, show them to the client. They're mostly static, maybe even pre-render them. And when I do that data fetching, of course, I don't want this to be hitting my Drupal server every time a user comes in. Let's cache it, right? So there's a pattern called ISR, which lets me basically tell my page how long it should live in the CDN. And I could do this on both the page level, which I'll show later, as well as some of the request level, data fetching level requests. So I could indicate I need 60 minutes or 60 seconds, and I could say I would like to cache this for hours. There's different patterns to do that. So the key to enable that is, of course, with caching, you need to invalidate it sometimes. And there's a on-demand revalidation feature in Next.js that you can basically call an endpoint and say, well, this page is no longer valid, so please refetch it. Either using a revalidate path, revalidate tag for tag-based revalidation, and lots of cool things like that. So let me demonstrate this pattern to you. And of course, we're going to jump into some of the cool things about preview right after that. Okay, so for me to be able to do ISR or incremental static regeneration, I actually need to have what's called a build app. So this app would be statically generated, all the like JavaScript bundle would be generated and stored on the server and deployed in case of deploying to platforms like Vercel, deployed to serverless infrastructure. For this static regeneration on demand to be possible, not during build time, but to be a delayed process. So I'm building this app and starting it just like I'm starting an app on a node server. And this is my page, and I need to remove that thing. So I have this quick helper here that shows me when the page was finally rendered, 21:38. So 21:38:22, let me refresh, 21:38:22. So this is what I call a static page. This page doesn't change unless you invalidate it or unless it expires. So let me show you how that's done. So inside of the page, what we call it the route segment, you have this revalidate 120 seconds. And this page would basically be valid for 120 seconds and never receive any change on it. So let's try to edit that page in Drupal. So I go here, I have the home page. For example, I have Alchemist Vault 1. I'm going to save this translation. And this page, if I open it here, it says Alchemist Vault 1. But let me go back to my static page. Okay, I actually have to open this in an anonymous window. Okay, so this is my static page though, and you see still Alchemist Vault until 120 seconds pass and it will say Alchemist Vault 2. And this is because when I open this in Drupal, I open this with something called Preview API, which gives me the no cache version, on-demand fetched, basically bypasses that ISR layer. But I don't want that for all of my users. That's only for my offers. So now finally 120 seconds passed, and I see that being updated to Alchemist Vault 1. Let me do another test. Let's say I'm not willing to wait 120 seconds and I want to save this and I wanted this to be invalidated immediately. So if I refresh this, of course, it's still Vault 1. So what I have is basically a way to manipulate revalidation of the page using what Next.js calls revalidate route, or basically I expose an API to make a revalidation. And this API right now looks at different things, looks at the secret. I don't want to look at the secret. Let me quickly comment that out so that we are super insecure about this and just do whatever I tell my API to do. No secrets, because we don't have time. So I just want to give it the path, and okay, tags is fine. And it should do the work. Please do the work. Okay. So now I go here and I give it the path. What was my page? I guess / home. No need for en. Okay, invalid secret. Why would you tell me that? Oh, that's because it's a built app. It doesn't take my changes. So let's build it again quickly. I hope that's the last time I have to build it. If not, I'm just skipping this exercise and going straight to the next section. And I think I'm going to do that because 45 minutes is in 3 minutes. So yes. So you'll have to believe me because I want to really touch on the next topic, but I can hit revalidate and basically that static route will be invalidated on demand. You don't have to wait 120 seconds. And that's very important and cool. But the last thing I wanted to give you is something that I mentioned in the beginning that I think is very important is that immediate feedback loop and ability to edit side by side. It's not as cool as Contentful, but let's see what we can achieve. And by the way, there are developments there that are going to make it much cooler. But we'll work with what we have right now. So I go here and I would like to edit this page. So I go to the page itself. I go to edit button and I would like to make an edit here. But I don't want this edit to go and be published right away. I want to click preview here and basically see my it should work. Why are you not working? It was working. I don't know.
It's not working because it's a live demo, and that's how live.
Of course, yes. That's okay. I could give you one here. There should be an off-screen editor coming right up, and there isn't one. Okay, give me just a second. So, visual editor. Yes, it should be opening the off-screen editor. Off canvas editor. Oh, I know why. That's because next Drupal module is enabled, and I don't need that. I think for my demo. That's okay. We don't have to do this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So what I wanted to show you is visible in a different spot where I'm getting all these ideas, and I'm gonna just quickly plug my friend's project where I'm getting all these ideas from. And this is Jesus Molivas, who is developing a Drupal starter kit, basically, that I'm trying to replicate in this demo. And you can launch one, which basically will spin up a tugboat instance for you. And you can play with this at any point you wish. And it does all the same things that I'm doing. It's just a different repository. So you could follow his project as well. So he's really pioneering a lot of these things, and I'm just showcasing from my perspective. But there's not a lot of time, so I wanted to go through kind of some of the recap and quickly go into just some of the thanks that I have. So I think if you learn today anything, I think GraphQL plus TypeScript, in my mind, is love, and it's the AI proof workflow as well, because AI hallucinates a lot. And I don't write front-end code, by the way. This is me as a backend developer enjoying this so much. Decoupled does not mean bad editorial experience. We saw that with Contentful. I wanted to show that with Drupal. That's fine. By the way, the recording of this session of the Florida Drupal camp actually has a working demo. So you can go visit that one. And then finally, React is not necessarily a client-side framework. There's a lot of things developing. React is React server components are fully PHP for React, basically. And I wanted to kind of drive that point home. A lot of the folks to follow who are in that space, Shatsian, I mentioned Shatsian coming from Drupal community, took over the world with his UI library, and all of these AI tools right now use that. So kudos to him. Jesus built this starter kit and pioneered a lot of the GraphQL compose things that I was showing with data fetching in his project. Brian Perry and John Albin finished incredible work on the Next.js module for Drupal that allows you all of these preview capabilities and on-demand revalidation that was not able to demo today. And if you want to follow the decoupled Drupal project, it's the first QR code. And finally, my Contentful converted to Drupal is I have a project called Next CMS that I'm planning to bring more heads to. So you can follow that one here. And thank you very much for your time. I don't know if we have any time for questions. But
one question in the chat that came up earlier from Andre. Andre, do you want to ask your question? Kind of an overview type question.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you know Preston. So
I do.
He's been writing some blog entries for a little while, maybe a year or so, and he's been saying that the monolithic projects have been adding decoupled, and the decoupled projects have been adding monolithic features.
Yes, they all converge, right?
Yeah, so they're converging, and he's calling it the universal CMS.
Yes,
so
I was following.
Perfect. So question number one, what's your view of this amalgam? Does it do nothing well, or is it truly the best of all worlds? And then number two, can Drupal compete well in this category?
Absolutely. I think the things I mentioned in the beginning is while CMSs that are headless optimize for that previewing ability out of the box from core, a lot of things could be recreated in Drupal to achieve kind of a similar thing. And Experience Builder is moving a lot in this direction, by the way. If you watched anything on Experience Builder is adding React components as a no-code component ability. So that's cool. But there's no development on the API level layer of inclusion things in core that I would wish would happen more. To compete with headless CMSs, vendors have to be positioning themselves around going to market together. And I think this is where mock world wins a lot, because they can guarantee an API doesn't change tomorrow. And Drupal is a very capable and mature system from the editorial perspective, but you have to make it work with the rest of the systems, which is, as developers, is fine. But it's kind of a different vibe, if it makes sense. I think Drupal certainly has a future as a contrib version headless solution, if you will. But I would like to see what is the headless Drupal CMS looking like. And I think we have the project. It's just not official. So follow these two projects for that. Good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. If you guys want to engage with me, I didn't put my credentials anywhere here, but you can find me from the Stanford camp page.
Yes.
Thank you very much, guys. See you later.
Thanks, Alexei.
Thank you.
Okay.